It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. We got a guest today, Alan. Not the OG form of Steelers Afternoon Drive. A guest today, Austin Bechtold, joining the show. Produces 93.7, writes for, I think, like 75 different sites, I believe, at this point in time. Austin, how we doing?
Doing great, guys. Smitty, Alan, thanks for having me on. Appreciate the invite and looking forward to talking some Steelers.
Absolutely. Of course. Alan, we know, based on if people follow you on X, they know that at some point today you're going to want to get on your soapbox and talk about a topic that comes up. I feel like at least once every off season and once in season as well. We will get to that in a little bit, but ball knower, the ultimate ballage guy. He holds the record right now for ballage awards of Steelers Afternoon Drive. Not sure exactly what that number is. I'm just assuming that he holds the record at this point.
I think Thomas it's like Brocious.
2. Which would be the record. Thomas Brocious had a great question for us from yesterday's Steelers episode that I want to dive into. He said, I would be interested to hear what Alan thinks we need to become a serious Super Bowl contender. Is it just a quarterback, more mature offensive line, and a receiver? Do we need all three? How good of a quarterback do we need to get there?
Yeah, so if you didn't listen to yesterday's show, well, what the heck is wrong with you, and why not? First of all,
right.
Subscribe to the YouTube channel, get that bell so you get notifications, download the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you can find podcasts, so you don't miss one. But if you did happen to miss one, I'll forgive you this time. I said yesterday that the Steelers are not Super Bowl contenders, even if they traded for Brandon Ayuk right now, which is the best possible addition I can even fathom them making between now and the start of the season. And I think this is a really good and really fair question from Thomas, because I don't really think I've answered this yet this offseason about, okay, so if that doesn't get it done, what would? And I think, yeah, like an addition of wide receiver would be a start. But to me, I don't think we should have faith in this version of the Pittsburgh Steelers until we see two really important things. One is, in order to be a Super Bowl contender, you have to have above average quarterback play. Or an elite offensive scheme. Right, that's all we've seen. We've seen Shanahan take Brock Purdy to the Super Bowl, and we've seen above-average quarterbacks. Well, they don't have to be great. Like, is Jalen Hurts an elite quarterback? Was Matt Ryan an elite quarterback? You can get to the Super Bowl with 8 to 12 in the league quarterback play. But it's got to be above average, or you have to have elite offense. Now, we've seen enough out of Arthur Smith over his years. I'm pretty sure we're not getting elite offense. So, what are they getting? Are they getting enough scheme and enough quarterback out of these guys to get there? Like right now, it just doesn't add up to me. Russell Wilson was an average quarterback last year. He's 35 years old. He's probably only going to be worse. Justin Fields has a ton of talent, but has never really put it together and was below average in his 3 years as the quarterback in Chicago. I think Arthur Smith was a decent offensive coordinator hire. I think he can significantly raise the floor of this team's offense, but can he raise the ceiling enough to get it to a Super Bowl contender just with, running the ball more, some play action? Like, this isn't Shanahan. This isn't McVay. This isn't like one of the most dynamic offenses in the league, and I don't think it's going to be. So, yeah, I don't see the solution to that problem. Like, you either need elite offensive scheme or really good quarterback play, and I don't see either of those happening with the collection of talent the Steelers have in those places right now. And so, until one of those things changes, I'm not going to see them as a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Now, look, once every decade, the Baltimore Ravens ride a hot defense and Trent Dilfer to a quarterback. Like, yeah, I guess it can happen. But, I don't think that's something that we should be talking about as a realistic possibility in the offseason.
Yeah, I want to get Austin's take on this, obviously, as well. But I think that it's fair to expect the Steelers to take a leap on the offensive side of the ball compared to what we've seen over the last few seasons, right? But I also think it's fair to look at them across the scope and look at the landscape of the NFL, look at what they're going up against, not only in the division, but inside the conference, and say, okay, like, even if they do improve, what does that improvement get them? So that's why, like I've said all along, when people ask me, what do I think the record of this team is going to be? I haven't necessarily changed that from past years all that much, like in the 10-7 range, but I think that they're a better football team. I just think that you look at the landscape of the NFL and improved play within the division and within the conference, and that's still obviously factoring into that. Austin, what's your take currently on the state of the Steelers, and if you view them as a contender?
Well, if the offense is not better than last year's team, then
we got a lot of problems.
There'll be a lot of problems. The offensive line is considerably better. I mean, there's no doubt about that. You finally have bookend tackles for the first time since Villanueva and Gilbert, and you just hope that they're healthy. 10 plus years. So that's obviously one key point to start. But if you don't have a Lamar Jackson, a Joe Burrow, a Patrick Mahomes, a Trevor Lawrence, you could just keep going in the AFC with quarterbacks. I mean, if you were in the NFC, I'd have a much easier argument to make based on can the Steelers be a legit Super Bowl contender, because you're talking about Dallas, Philadelphia, San Francisco, the Lions, everyone else. The AFC, you could just rattle off 7 different quarterbacks that Russell Wilson doesn't even get close to. So that's the number one reason why I don't think that they're a legit Super Bowl contender, even though the running game should be better. The offensive scheme should be better, although not elite. They need another wide receiver. It's no secret or surprise to anybody that they need another one. Would Brandon Ayuk put them considerably closer to being a Super Bowl contender? Yes, but at the same time, we haven't seen one Arthur Smith snap with this collective of players. So the first couple of weeks will definitely determine a lot more. But no, right now, they're not getting to the Super Bowl. They wouldn't even get to the AFC Championship. You got to win a playoff game first before we even talk about the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a fair take too. The other thing that I kind of thought about as you were talking there, and I've stated my concern with the way that the offense is going to get out of the gate. A lot of people have talked about the offensive line because of that, but honestly, just, across the board with how much turnover there has been offensively. Wouldn't that be an argument, though, to kind of bring, and again, this is something that we got to wait out and see. We'll see if there even is another addition at wide receiver, but to get them in the fold as soon as possible. That way they're getting acclimated as quick as possible, kind of with the rest of this team, with integrating them into this offense.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could look at it two ways. Like, you look at it one way where, like, if they can't win in the first half of the season without the offense operating at full speed, then they certainly aren't going to win the second half of the season, even with it operating at full speed, right? Like if they can't muddle through September while the offense gets on its feet with a 2-2, 3-1 record, then they're just going to get blown out in December anyway, and it doesn't matter. So I think there's kind of two sides of it there. But I do think that if they're going to make, like, I don't know. Like, I do think that this is a team that actually could be active at the trade deadline if they do well in the first half of the season. Like, we've seen more and more NFL trades at the trade deadline over the last few years. I feel like that is becoming – like, it used to be like you were crazy to wait for the trade deadline to make a move because you were never sure that there was going to be someone there. I feel like over the last few years, we've actually, I think there's enough data now that there's probably going to be a couple high-profile trades made. This could be a team that, if they do well in the first half of the season, does look to add at the trade deadline to sort of bolster the ranks for that crazy stretch run. But I still think the receiver room is not good enough as it sits there today. I think they have been, and will continue to try to find an addition. I'm just a little bit skeptical that there's a major improvement out there to be made. It takes two teams to make a trade. There's next to nobody left on free agency. I just don't know how it happens.
Oh, we haven't necessarily seen them be buyers yet at the trade deadline, but Omar does kind of give off the vibe that he would be willing to be aggressive on that front, though. And to your point, this year at the deadline, they will have not yet played a divisional game.
Yeah. So like, they could load up at, like, if they're I don't expect this to happen, but okay, I think outside of Dallas, I think they'll probably be within like a field goal betting line of every other game in the first half of the schedule, right? I mean, I think that's pretty fair. Let's say they're 7-1. Like, yeah, absolutely. Like, go get it. Like, go trade for everybody you can. Why not? Like, go for it at that point. But I think I would need to see a lot to get there. And we talked a lot about Ayuk in general. Like, I just don't think that they're even. I'm not even sure they're in a position with the quarterback and the offensive coordinator to even make good on that investment right now. Like, I don't know. I got to see a lot more from those guys before I'm there.
Yeah, that's fair. Austin, I brought up Omar Khan within there. What do you make of the early returns of Omar Khan's tenure so far?
I mean, I don't know how you could say much else other than that. Like, his drafts are the first thing that I look at when you're talking about a general manager, because not a lot of trades are made in football. It's just not. And when you look at getting Justin Fields for basically nothing, was given away from Chicago, another rip-off the Steelers made of the Bears, similar to Chase Claypool. That's one highlight. Also, when you're able to get Joey Porter Jr. because of that Claypool trade, his drafts have been 2 A's for me. And we haven't seen, obviously, this current draft on the field yet, other than just football and shorts. But the other moves that he's made, Russell Wilson, convinced him to come in for nothing. Was that more of an accuracy thing? I don't know, but still on the team, it's an upgrade over Kenny Pickett. I still want to see corner and wide receiver added. The one blemish, I think, on Omar Khan right now, I like that he moved off Pickett. He admitted that the Steelers were wrong on that pick and pivoted. The Deontay Johnson move is something that I'm hesitating at a little bit, just because it'd be nice to have that wide receiver in the room, even though I'm glad they got rid of the personality out of the room, because it seems like it caused a lot of issues. Him and Pickens together is a big hole at receiver right now until you get to Roman Wilson as the 3. I mean, he hasn't established himself as that even yet. So Omar gets an A. It would be an A+ if he figures out wide receiver.
Yeah, I think it's very fair to be like, I don't think that there's anything wrong with the Deontay Johnson trade and deciding that you want to be done with the person, and that if you weren't going to extend him, that he might cause problems, and that you want to be able to fairly evaluate the person that you have in George Pickens separated from him. Like, I think there's a lot there that made that trade make sense. But if they knew they were good, like, Deontay Johnson just didn't suddenly become a problem on May 13th or March 13th. Like, if they knew they were going to make that move, they should have been more proactive. They have the money. They're sitting on the money, and there's no one left to spend it on. Like, they could have been more. And they spent the early part of free agency. They didn't talk to anybody at wide receiver. Yeah, they brought in Mitch Morse at center. And, there was like traded numbers with Tyler Boyd and asked Mike Williams to come in, and that was it. Like, it didn't seem like it was a very good process at the wide receiver position to me, where, like, if you knew you were going to trade Deontay Johnson, why weren't you more aggressive in finding someone else? You have the money. You have the ability to do it. I don't understand why we had to get here for this whole offseason of Ayuk talk. It could have been avoided if they'd have just signed Gabe Davis. Like, it didn't have to be Brandon Ayuk. It didn't have to be like, oh, he's a top 7 wide receiver in the NFL. Like, it could have just been anybody. It would have been fine.
There is some parallel in their game, but it's funny you said, because like that's somebody that I'm not necessarily super high on as a player, but specifically for Arthur Smith, Gabe Davis would have been nice.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, one thing that I'm interested to see with Omar, and I'm not completely rolling out the idea that the future Steelers quarterback isn't on the roster right now, but I am intrigued by the idea of when that time comes for him to be the guy to kind of find that solution via the draft, like the long-term plan there. Because like Austin in his answer said about Omar Khan's returns, I've also loved the first 2 drafts, and they haven't included trying to find that franchise guy. Like, I'm just super intrigued by what that process could look like when we get there.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah,
that's a big part of it. I like Justin Fields a lot. The intangibles are there. It's something that big arm, fast, speed that the last quarterback just did not have. Now, can you hone it in? Is Arthur Smith the guy to be able to do so? Only time will tell. But Omar Khan's playing Madden with some of these moves, and he's not being overly aggressive. I like it.
Yeah, like you said, like not necessarily giving up. He hasn't mortgaged the future in any of these that he's doing, but being very coy about it. Anything else on this particular topic, the state of the Steelers? I know Alan's chomping at the bit, so all right, let's dive into the topic that he really wants to talk about here as it came up. I will give Alan credit for this, because it's not like he went on to X today and went seeking this out. He didn't cause this drama to stir up on its own. Cam Hayward having a conversation with Trey Wingo about this is the reason that Alan had to jump in. But like I said, basically 2 times or so within a calendar year.
Had to.
He had to. He had to jump in. Basically, at least 2 times within a calendar year, Allen decides he's got to jump on his soapbox about the sacks versus pressures, the whole PFF conversation. Those guys, of course, come into it. And Allen, I don't know if I need to set the table any more than that. I'll just give you the floor.
Yeah, man. I mean, this whole thing started when there's a conversation with Trey Wingo, and who was it? Was an NFL player, right? This wasn't like some like rando, right? This was like a real thing.
I mean, Trey Wingo and Cam were the ones that were having the conversation, but Trey quoted 33rd Team Football on a clip of Max Crosby talking to like young players.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So it was the thing, Max Crosby. I think this was from the Von Miller pass rush thing, right? Was this where the initial quote came from? The idea that a pressure could ever be as valuable as a sack on an average basis is just so fundamentally stupid that I cannot even believe that there are people talking about this. Like we understand the range of possibilities that could happen on a sack. The offense has lost at least 1 yard, okay? Their quarterback has been physically contacted by a defensive player. They might have fumbled. Their quarterback might have got hurt. He might be a little bit sore. He might be a little afraid to take a hit later in the game. Okay, but we know they at least lost yardage. Okay, how many times over the last 10 years has somebody pressured Patrick Mahomes and then watch him throw a touchdown pass and celebrate all over them? Like, you know that the pressure can result in no benefit whatsoever to the defense. And sure, pressures can result in interceptions too, but there is a floor on how for the offense a sack can be. The best case scenario is you lose 1 yard and your quarterback didn't get hurt that badly. Like that is like, what are we talking about? Like PFF and you like the longtime audience here is well aware of my feelings about PFF. Okay, well aware. I think they're at best deeply misguided about a lot of things about football. Okay, and at worst, probably frauds. But they did math. This was a few years ago now, but they did math in 2018 that said a sack is 4 times more valuable to the defense than a play where the quarterback is, or a player is given a hurry and a hit, quarterback hit. So he's hurried and hit. 5 times more valuable than just hit, and 10 times more valuable than just pressured. So it is 10-1 in terms of EPA per play that you would rather have a sack than a pressure. And this doesn't even get into the whole like pass rush win rate thing, but the idea, the reason that people talk about pass rush win rate is that it's a statistical theory that when you have whatever you want to call them, chunky events, low repeatability, right? You're only getting, even if you're TJ Watt, you're only getting 20 sacks in the season. So you have a small sample size. It's difficult to derive statistical meaning from something that only happens 20 times a year. You have more pressures and way more pass rush win-loss events. So it's easier to build a statistical consensus about the person. But if we have this guy that keeps getting all these sacks without needing more pass rush wins and more pressures to get them, doesn't that make the whole process invalid? Like, I just, this whole thing boggles my mind that some very smart people have been so thoroughly fooled by something that is so obviously wrong. I just don't get it.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, we had the same conversation going back to last year, obviously the defensive player of the year conversation stuff. And it's like, while I get that you are looking for something that is predictive, by the time that you get to the end of the year, why are you still looking for something that can predict the production of through the season? Like, so if you're looking at it like in a small sample size, sure, if you're trying to predict what the outcomes will be for that player throughout the course of a season. But once you get to the end of the season, why are you looking at that as opposed to the actual production itself? That's the part that I don't get. And like you said, the absolute best outcome of an actual sack is still a negative play for the offense. The best outcome of a pressure can obviously be a negative play for the offense, but the worst outcome for the defense is it still turns into a touchdown, like you mentioned with Patrick Mahomes. So I don't know. I don't even know why this is a conversation, but it certainly has been. Austin, what's your take?
Alan's 100% right. Like, there's no argument to be made here in favor of pressures. I mean, there really isn't. And Alan had a good way of putting it. Like, the worst thing that can happen, pressures force incompletions. They force maybe shorter gains. They might force interceptions. Sacks force major losses of yards, which, I mean, isn't it better to have 2nd and 18 than 2nd and 10 because a pressure forced an incompletion, or maybe a strip sack, fumble, anything to be able to score a touchdown, turnover, whatever it might be. I just don't see any reasonable way that you could think pressures is better than ultimately getting home.
And like the other thing I want to mention here is go ask a defensive lineman. I mean, obviously Cam is giving the defensive line perspective. Go find me a quarterback that's like, oh, I would rather be sacked than pressured. Find me a quarterback out there that's going to be like, no, I actually want the 300-pound guy to land on top of me while I'm trying to hold on to the football instead of just running away from him and maybe making a bad pass as a result.
Yep.
Like, who's the guy signing up for that? One sack can end a team's season. Like that, we have seen it happen, right? Go out there and somebody smashes Joe Burrow in week 1, the Bengals are cooked. Like, everyone involved in the process would say they would take the pressure over the sack if they're on offense, and they would take the sack over the pressure if they're on defense. What? Why? I don't. It's like people. It's like you have to sound smart, I guess. Like you want to take dude, this is what really bothers me about PFF is that it's dressed up like it's data, but it's not. It's just opinions. And for whatever reason, people think that citing this nonsense makes them sound smarter than just talking about football the way we all understand it to be played, including the players.
I was just say the reason that like it bothers me so much is I have greatly appreciated the introduction of analytics. Like when I was introduced to them in baseball and really started to like dive into the data, it opened my eyes like in ways that I didn't like, wasn't looking at the game. So like when the introduction of PFF, when people started to introduce me to it, I was like, I don't know, like something seems off here. Like it didn't really equate the way that I felt like it was in baseball to football. And how did we get to this point, I guess, is the question that I want to pose now is, how did we get to the point where we are even having this as a conversation? There are people that are buying into this.
Well, in analytics, one major problem with it is they're making people not trust their eyes and what they're like truly watching and witnessing, because it's paralysis of analysis, right? I mean, is that the best way to put it, Alan?
Well, here's what I think it is. Like, baseball analytics, and to a lesser extent, hockey and basketball analytics, which kind of came along in the immediate sort of wake of baseball analytics, did a lot of work to get people to stop not necessarily trusting their eyes, but to stop believing things just because they've always believed them. That was a leap that those people like Bill James, like Billy Beane, if you've seen Moneyball, like those people had to convince people to take that leap, to say, just because I've always thought this does not mean it's true. It's not about not trusting your eyes. It's about setting aside prior beliefs that are not necessarily grounded in fact. And that is really difficult to get people to do. And in baseball, it took overwhelming evidence and teams using it on the field and just lapping the field in terms of success, maybe not the World Series, but comparative success and what they were setting out to do with their opponents before other teams were like, oh my gosh, we're falling behind. We have to catch up. And I feel like what PFF did was they just took advantage of those people wearing down people's ability, their willingness to hold on to their preconceived notions, that now they like took advantage of the trust that people that were actually doing analytics work had done, and then just usurped it to say, we look like those people and we sound like those people, so you should trust us like you trust those people too.
Right. Yeah. I was just saying, to me, it's not an apples to apples thing with like at least PFF and what they're presenting as analytics, the window dressing of it being so. It's not. That's the problem that I have with it. But either way, again, we could probably talk about this a lot longer. But we appreciate the conversation. Let us know in the comments your thoughts, obviously, on the topic. We always love hearing about that. Anything else on that, Alan, before we talk about Austin a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I just, I guess the thing I want to say about this is like the people inside football know, that's the like. Why aren't there like I don't the thing I really don't understand. I know why a lot of people in my position don't talk about this because people become writers because they're no good at math. For like a large where's Chevy Chase? I was told there would be no math. That's sports writing, right? Like we don't understand it. We can't do the math, so we don't want to say, oh well, your math is wrong. But there need to be more people to stand up and say this is crap because it is.
There you go. And I think this is actually something, Alan. I love when we talk about this though, because this is something that you are always in lockstep with the people in the comments. So unlike
It's
people
funny. So
bashing you,
I was arguing with a Browns fan today about this on Twitter,
yeah,
and he's
see?
like, "Oh, you're just saying what your audience wants to hear." I'm like, the last thing I spend my time doing is saying things the audience wants to hear. Like, there's a reason Smitty's on this show because they'd just turn it off if it was just me all the time because I'd just do nothing but make them mad every day.
Yeah, actually, everybody in the audience, please let us know right now how much you always agree with the takes of Alan Saunders on these episodes. Austin, we always dedicate the last portion of the show when we have guests on just to talk about yourself a little bit. You recently took on a new role at 93.7 The Fan, so we can dive into that a little bit as well. Let us know, obviously, about your journey to where you're at now and what this new role is.
Well, a big part of my journey is the man that's on the screen with us right now. Alan, I mean, was a big part of it. So went to Baldwin High School, wrote for the student paper at the Purbalite there. It was the first podcast editor they had. Went to Robert Morris for a couple of years. And as I met Alan when I was at Robert Morris and I was a sophomore, he spoke in one of our sports writing classes. So I was introduced to him there, got a chance to talk to him. We connected throughout the summer. I transferred to Waynesburg for some more broadcast opportunities. And I was able to intern with PSN, Pittsburgh Sports Now, that summer into that fall, stuck on and covered the ACC tournament further the next year, the NCAA tournament with George Michalowski, who got a great promotion with the company as well. The past year, the ACC tournament and the NCAA tournament as well, writing for PSN, Nittany Sports Now. And I mean, Alan took a chance on me. So it's always great to be able to thank and now be able to talk to you guys about it is pretty cool. And then started at the Fan. I started at KDK Radio first, my junior year at Waynesburg. Summer going into senior year, I got a part-time producer job there. And about a year later, as soon as I got back from that NCAA tournament, I was talking to the Fan for a while about starting to produce there. Was able to do so. Crowley got promoted to full-time hosting, so a producer spot opened up. So me and someone else split time there. And then Matt Cole, who was producing the Cook and Joe show at the time before Ron retired. Ron and Folsey left probably about 2 weeks in between each other. So then I just naturally stepped in there and it just fit like a glove. I mean, working with Joe's been really cool and he's accepted me a lot and embraced me, and working with Paul Zeiss as well. And let's just say there is never a dull moment whatsoever working with those two guys, and being officially named their full-time producer yesterday was awesome.
So you're talking about Joe there, and I've known Joe for a little while, and I don't know how to. He's a unique guy. I think that's probably the best way I can describe him. How aware of Joe's like foibles were you before you started working with him, and how much has this been like a fun process for you getting to know him? Because like that's a unique challenge, man. Like I'm not saying like Joe's a bad guy or hard to work with, but he's unique, and I can see that not being for everyone.
Joe's honestly a pretty easy guy to work with. The more and more that I have worked with him, it was a little bit tough at first, and working with Ron was I can't speak. Was a little edgy, at least at first. But I was able to produce his last show, which was really cool. And talking to Joe Namath and Joe Green within a 15-minute span is one of my lifetime memories I'll always take away from that. But now Joe, funny story, will call me every day before the show. And as you know, Joe loves to sing. One of Starkey's main things that just naturally, he doesn't really care what people think. He just loves to sing. He doesn't care what anybody says about his singing. So I will answer the phone. He'll call me every day. I'll go, "Hello, Joe." and he will start singing an impromptu song that he makes up with my name in it every single day. And we will prep out the show that way after we get in a couple of laughs and talk about the song. So that puts Starkey in the best perspective for you, but great dude. He's taken me under his wing. Fantastic opportunity with him, and him and Paul give me a lot of airtime as well on their show, and I'm really appreciative for that as I just continue to try to grow my career and eventually, be in a similar spot as them.
I don't care how much you ask. I'm not going to sing to you every day. It's out of the question.
I don't even ask. He just does it.
Dang it. Austin, you kind of took the next question that I was going to ask you by answering that, because I was going to say, what is the ambition from here? What would you like the next step to be, going from producing to hosting? Is that something that you are super interested in, or where are we at with that?
Yeah, that's something I'm very interested in. Would like to continue producing, but I mean, hosting is, I think, everybody's ultimate goal once you get into radio. But I also love writing, and it's, conversations I've had with Alan as well as I took on the full-time job. I've always wanted to keep writing, keep covering sports, especially with this schedule that I have now, working the midday show. I mean, it leaves nights available. I'm still doing college football games on KDK Plus on the weekends in the fall. Still doing all my high school basketball stuff, high school football stuff, wanting to keep doing college basketball stuff, Penn State football stuff, everything. But yeah, I look at what Zeiss and Starkey do and what Ron Cook did and what Mueller does writing for the Beaver County Times. I'd like to write and also host a show. I'd love to do both because it's so important, as you guys know, in this business, to be just multifaceted and be able to do multiple different things and do them well. And I think recognizing that at a young age is something that I hope gives me an advantage as I move forward, and still pretty young, hoping that benefits me as well.
Yeah, man, as someone that does this every day, and obviously, this isn't a radio show, but it's a similar idea where you got to talk about something and you got to, it's so much easier for me because I'm there every day and I'm out there doing it. I think it's really hard when you're not as I feel like you got stuck, people get trapped in the radio booth, right? You don't get out there with what you're doing and what you're talking about and experience it. I think it's hard. So that's pretty awesome ambition. We talked about a question today from our good buddy and purveyor of ballage, Thomas Brocious. Do you have, as producer on the midday show on 93.7, do you have favorite callers or texters that you try to get on? And what gets one on your good side if I was, trying to get heard on the Joe Starkey show?
Yeah, there's a difference between the callers and texters, because the texters always will send in things for Text in the City, which is the final segment at the end of every show, where the texters will send in hot takes, and I'll read them to the guys on the show. There's a Ryan from Gibsonia. That's a very popular one. They'll just put very funny things in there. Callers, Rob in West Mifflin, just big takes, interested in everything. Rob in West Mifflin is a guy that would call me when I did the early morning show, when I was working the morning show a couple days a week. Also calls the midday show. I've heard him call the various other shows. Chuck in Uniontown's a 93.7 The Fan Hall of Famer. I've heard him call a Pirate postgame show at 11 o'clock at night and then call me at 5:30 in the morning wanting to talk Pirates on the early morning show. So, those type of people stand out, the ones that will text in and say all kind of different hot takes, but also just they hear something about you during the show. I mean, a lot of texters sent in and said hey, congratulations, great to hear. Or Joe's talking about golfing. Hey, I want to golf with Joe. I want to give this tip, this piece of advice, etc. So, just being you, wanting to be a part of the conversation. And, it's pretty fun being able to interact with everybody. And I answer a lot of the texts, and a lot of the callers are just happy to be able to talk to the guys. But if you bring a hot take and bring a big opinion, you're going to get on.
God, I love Pittsburgh so much. Austin, I know that we've had some back and forth interaction, but when Alan told me you were coming on, I was going through to send you the DM with the link. And I didn't realize how far back, so people that listen or watch this show know that I host another podcast called Around the 412. Back in 2018, we came out with a t-shirt design that we got to 30 some guys in the Pirates organization said, trust the Bucking process.
Trust the Bucking process. I still have that shirt.
Look, well, there you go, because that's what I was going to bring up. A little bit of a play on words. We put out a picture of the design, and you replied to this, and you were like, "Hey guys, big fan. How can I get one of these?" And I didn't realize that like it went that far back. How long we've kind of been interacting with each other. But I appreciate the support that you've given also around the 412.
Yeah, man. I don't even think I realized it's been that far either.
Oh,
And
yeah.
a good
6
buddy
years.
of mine has season tickets in the same section as you for the Steelers.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I see you all the time because he takes me to about 5-6 games. I mean, every game I'm like, there he is. There's Smitty cheering on Steelers. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Every Sunday home game, brother. All right. I think that's it, Alan, unless you got anything else.
No, I think I'm good.
There we go. Austin, tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at Austin R. Bechtold, my middle initial, Ray. And I'm on Instagram, Austin Bechtold _ I don't really use that other than anything personal stuff. And then also 93.7 The Fan, 10 to 2. You can find me writing Nittany Sports Now and Pittsburgh Sports Now stuff and SB Nation Pirate stuff.
There we go. Good stuff. Alan, you know the drill.
Does Joe know your middle name is Ray? I feel like he would work that into one of his like obsessive nickname things. Like that's.
I thought you were gonna say working into a song.
Or a song.
No, his middle name's Ray too.
Oh, okay. Just
geez.
a couple of Rays.
How about that?
You can find me at Saunders _ PGH on Twitter, arguing with people that don't understand that sacks are important. You can also find me using that same handle on Instagram and TikTok at PGH Steelers Now as a sites account. I try not to take that over with frivolous, argumentative conversations. SteelersNow.com. Promo code Allen10 gets $10 off an annual subscription. We're still breaking down Kevin Colbert's last draft classes. Went through 2021 today. Oh boy, it was it's a mess, is what it is. Go take a look at that. Join us on the subscription side. Lots of stuff from me and Derek Bell over there. More news coming up on the site, and yeah, that's it.
There we go. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell if you're watching on YouTube. Of course, hit us in the comments with your thoughts on anything we talked about, questions for a future episode, all that good stuff. Leave us a 5-star review and subscribe if you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. You can find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. Also, follow The Afternoon Drive on TikTok. We're posting 90-second clips over there every day, trying to keep up with that as well for the people that can't, this generation, short form content. That's what we're consuming more so than these 40-minute podcasts. But watch both, listen to both. That's the best way I could put it. Again, thanks to Austin Bechtold for joining us on this episode. For Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.